Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the East Brandywine Township Board of Supervisors PM meeting for Thursday, February 15th, 2024, 6:30 PM. A reminder, a recording device will be used during this meeting, and I'm going to open the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, just a reminder, rules of conduct for public meeting established by Resolution 2001-08. The time allotted to each individual making a comment shall be 3 minutes unless otherwise set by the presiding officer. Additional public comment may be granted at the discretion of the presiding officer at the conclusion of tonight's meeting. Do we have any public comment for agenda items? I do want to, I think I know what it's going to be, but I was going to say, two things. Let me get to this. Tonight's agenda item number 7G will be postponed. However, I will allow, if somebody wanted to make a comment on 7G, which will be the Applecross release of funds for their escrow, they can talk during that time. So don't feel like you have to, but talk now. If you want to talk then, I'll still open it up just for that conversation, but it's up to you.
We'll wait.
Okay, because I figured there's going to be people, but if you want to leave, I'm happy to let you talk now too, and you wouldn't have to sit through the...
Do you have any comments on any other agenda items?
On 7G, that is not happening tonight, I thought.
Correct, that's going to be, there's a little bit of confusion on some of the things that have to get done on that. So we're not going to be doing 7G tonight. We will be going on with the other two. But what I wanted to let everybody know is if you wanted to talk on 7G now, I'm happy to hear it now, and then you don't have to stay throughout the meeting if you didn't want to, or you can talk at 7G if you wanted to stay. It's totally up to you.
Yeah, no, I was interested in speaking to something.
But this is where you'd also talk, if you had any comments on item 9.
9, which
Yeah.
we talked.
Yep.
So
Yep.
anything on the
Yeah.
agenda, this is where you speak.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. You know, in general, I know that the board is considering looking at zoning, and having lived here in the township for many, many years now, and have lived through being in a new development, relatively new development, one of the things that clearly has changed here is the number of people that live here, which has dramatically changed. And I think, you know, we're sort of getting to a tipping point, it feels like to me. And I think that maybe many people feel that way, that we are at a tipping point in terms of the amount of people we have, the amount of cars moving through the township. Traffic is getting more and more severe. Early today at 3:15, literally traffic was just backed up from one light to the next on 322 all the way. And often later it'll be even further. And so in considering zoning, the idea of decreasing the density of housing on anything to be built in the future would be so highly advisable, I think. And I think this is something that came out in the study that was done as well, that not just I, but many of our residents feel the same way, that we need to relook at density. I know, having been on a board, HOA board of Applecross, which was a large development, you know, we've struggled with the density we had in some of the areas. And we've struggled with not having enough open space for children to play in. Many times our kids are playing in the streets. We don't have enough levels playing space for children to play in, for instance. We struggle with parking. We struggle with having adequate space for emergency vehicles to get through. We struggle with stormwater issues that are pretty significant. So I would encourage the board to think about if there's an opportunity to decrease densities, I would love for you to seize it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment for agenda items?
Bob Nye, 454 Hallman Court. My thought was on impervious areas. And 5B was originally planned to be 30-some homes. Ultimately, it was given 90-some homes. So the impervious has decreased, or the pervious has decreased significantly. And yet, whenever, so I don't know what the board's idea on this is. Do we want impervious or don't we? And high density, I mean, our township's just going more and more less pervious, that's all. I think that's a huge factor for us, especially with all of our basins that are having troubles. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I am on the new business docket, but I'd be happy to present what I've got now for the food truck festival in July.
If you're going to be an agenda item, I'm happy to.
Right, you don't have to
Yeah,
comment.
yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
okay.
Beth Watts. This is going to be a little bit of a follow-up on what the Nyes have already expressed as well, but I do also have concerns over the agenda item that I understand now is going to be postponed till later on rezoning. Particularly in some of the areas that are being considered for.
No, the rezoning's going to go on tonight.
It is?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Shall I hold it, my comment?
No, you're welcome to make a comment, absolutely.
Okay.
But I didn't want you to think it was getting,
Okay, all right, great.
the
Well,
release of escrow for Applecross is getting pulled today. That's all.
Okay, yeah, and this is separate from Applecross. Although there are some open space areas that are located around Applecross and many other areas around East Brandywine Township. And as Bonnie has mentioned too, I have some of the similar concerns regarding A, traffic, B, open space. But looking back at the comprehensive plan, it looks like in the comprehensive plan, the township has already agreed to look at preserving any undeveloped space to preserve the overall look. And I think this movement towards more high-density areas impacts that piece, as well as the traffic, as well as looking at some of the other properties that are local here that would also impact some of our freshwater streams like Beaver Creek. The property, I don't know if you have any updates on 550 East Reesville Road, that would back up and have stormwater drainage right next to Beaver Creek. I would strongly oppose and encourage the board to consider reducing the amount of homes that could be put on these undeveloped lots.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments? Okay, I do know that we have a time restraint for one of our guests tonight, so I want to make sure we have time to get that on there. What I'm going to do is we're going to go to the minutes of the previous meeting. We're going to hold off on the reports. We'll allow the. Was I correct that the East Brandywine okay. So we're gonna go to the previous minute meetings and do I have an approval of those?
I move we approve the minutes of the February 7th, no, not 7th, first meeting.
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so we're going to hold off on reports. We're going to hit new business A first, then we'll go back to the report. So if I can have the guests from East Brandywine Baptist Church.
Actually, I'm sorry, these minutes were the,
15th.
but that's today, so, and this is.
Yeah, so we would have been the first.
So the first is the, right, okay. Motion was good.
Yep. Go ahead, sorry. And then we're going to go back to our reports right after A, and then we'll continue on.
Okay. I just wanted to present what we're doing with East Brandywine Food Truck Festival. I am here, my name is Janet Doan. I'm here representing the church and the sponsors that help support the event. With coordinating dates with the East Brandywine Township, we have come to Saturday, July 13th, with a rain date of Sunday, July 14th. We're anticipating 13 to 14 food trucks this year, which would be like 10 entree trucks and 3 to 4 dessert trucks. We've averaged the last 2 years about 3,000 guests during those 2 years. We coordinate the event with the East Brandywine Police and Fire Departments for attendance and support at the festival. East Brandywine Police and our church security team work together during the event. We've met with the Parks and Rec Committee last Monday and obtained their approval for use of the park. And prior to the event, we obtained approval from Sean Wright, the principal of Brandywine Wallace Elementary School, to park on the school property. The evening ends at dark with firework display, which I'm here to receive approval to do. We inform all of the neighbors on Dilworth, School Lane, Keller Way, the end of the Ferndale Lane that backs into the park, and Kristen Circle, the houses that back onto the park, with written notices that we're doing this and with invites to the event. And I personally visit the Permy house and speak to Leslie or Dave and make them aware of the event, because their property runs between the two parks. And that's basically it. Just wanted to get the approval of the board to proceed with fireworks and the event.
And does the fire department or the police department have any input on this?
Oh, yeah, we meet with them. Coordinator.
Yep, you're good. Any questions? Any motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the East Brandywine Township Baptist Church food truck and fireworks use of the park.
I'll second.
Any questions from the audience? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom. As I indicated to Luke, I have a limited time this evening also, and I apologize for that.
yep, I actually
So-
just, I was gonna say, I was gonna rephrase what I said earlier. I'm gonna hold off on the minutes, and I'm gonna hold off on the reports for the managers' meeting and police and fire and so on and so forth. So we'll start with the most important things that you need to be here for, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Which would you want to start with first, Tom?
Well, I think we can start with item 7E, which is a financial security release for Mapleview, both E and F.
Okay, so let's go and do that.
You have a letter from Benoni which recommends release of the amounts in the letters, but the township engineer is required to certify that all of the improvements have been completed in accordance with the approved plan. Benoni's letters have a disclaimer in them, which frankly says the opposite. It sort of disclaims any statement that it complies with the plan. I pointed this out to Nate today, and he said he really couldn't change it today, but he would talk to, I guess, management of the company and see what he could do. So I don't know of any controversy regarding the release of these amounts. I presume the facilities are completed, and I don't know whether Nate is there tonight, but I think you could approve these releases subject to Benoni providing a certification that the improvements are completed with the approved plan and the specifications of the township.
Okay, and I think that's a good point. I don't have a problem with the release of the funds, provided that we follow that guideline as well. And I'll leave it to the board to discuss it and see if anybody has any other input.
Go by recommendations that Tom's put.
I don't know, I understand what Mr. Esty said, and that makes some sense. I just have a discomfort level over approving something that hasn't been certified yet. So, at the same token, I did review the releases, and there's still money in there. It's not the final release. I'm troubled in approving it, but I understand we need to move things along too, so. Tom, what assurances are we going to get that they're going to make that change?
I have no assurance that you are going to get it.
Right, I can see
So
them
the only-
saying that that's corporate policy and they won't change it.
I have a feeling that this is some kind of a form letter, and the attorneys of Pannoni made them put this in there. So I don't really have a lot of confidence that it's going to be changed, but we're sort of between a rock and a hard place because the municipality's planning code requires that we take action on these within 45 days of their submission. That 45 days is close to expiring, and frankly, it may have expired. So the only other option you have is to deny both the request. That will not prevent them from resubmitting them for your AM meeting in March. You could do that.
I just feel uncomfortable not having it certified because just in the 2 years that I've been on the board, we've had situations where things have not been certified or completed, and construction has gone ahead. I know this is different than construction, but I have that discomfort, and quite frankly, you're right, Pannoni's a large organization. I'm sure their attorneys will tell them you cannot take that out of there. And then that creates a problem because the municipal planning code requires that they certify it. So
Right.
I like the idea to give them a couple weeks to try to correct that, and we can put it on our March 1st agenda.
Are we at a deadline, Tom?
I don't know. I don't know when they were originally submitted to Pannoni. I think it's very close to the 45 days. So my recommendation to the board, considering Carl's comments, which I can't disagree with, I would recommend then you make separate motions for E and F denying the request to release the financial security, with the condition that they can resubmit for the March 1st meeting.
I just find it inappropriate for it not to be certified.
I absolutely agree with you, and it's a bigger problem than just these two releases.
All right, you want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we table the approval of financial security release for Maple View. It's Phase 1, Release 4. Is that the one we're talking about?
It would, the
It's both,
motion would be
it's
a
both of
denial.
them.
No, I'm going to make a motion that we give them time to correct the submission.
But I think, if I'm understanding Tom correctly, it's either an approval or denial. It's not a,
All right, then the motion is to, well, I wanted to,
I know.
is to deny it, but reconsider on the March 1st meeting. Is
Yeah,
that
that's fine.
okay?
Yeah. And I'll second that. Any discussion from the audience or anybody here? I agree. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, that covers E, and we have to do a separate one for F, Tom?
Yes, you should. With the same motion.
Yep.
All right, I'll make a motion that, whatever I said for the Phase 2, Release 3 in Maple View.
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Tom, what else did you?
Now, well, I don't know whether you need any input from me and any of the items in Roman numeral 9, which are these draft ordinances. The board has the authority. I mean, typically the planning commission reviews draft ordinances. I think the planning commission did discuss all three of these. I don't know that they made a recommendation, but the board does have the authority, this board has the authority to take action for permission to advertise in the case of item B, and permission to refer the ordinances to the Chester County Planning Commission in the case of items C and D?
I prefer that we do discuss them, and just in case we need your advice as our solicitor.
That's fine. So I would say that we should start with item 9B.
Okay. Go ahead, Luke.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Included in your packet this evening is a Act 247 review letter prepared by Chester County. The last time the board considered this item, it was to authorize staff to send draft ordinance amending the densities allowed in R1 and R2 for parcels developed as clusters. At the Planning Commission meeting last week, the Planning Commission's recommendation was that the Board of Supervisors proceed to advertise the draft ordinance for adoption. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
B.
Is it fair to say a majority agreed to that?
Okay, all right.
Okay, well, I amend my earlier statement, and for the purposes of recording, since you're not at a microphone, Mr. Rawlings has corrected my earlier statement. A majority of members of the Planning Commission recommended that the board forward the draft ordinance or advertise it for adoption at a future meeting.
I thought the vote was unanimous.
Is this the time we get to discuss it here?
I'm pretty sure it's unanimous. Okay.
All right, well, nonetheless,
I
there was a
honestly-
quorum and it was voted on and it went on. So, let's have some discussions at the board while we have Tom.
I mean, I have comments with regards to this ordinance, and I've been going back and forth with this. I came out against this ordinance, and I'll tell you why. Back in the 90s, I'm a lifelong resident of this community. We worked so hard to preserve open space before we even had an open space program in place. We worked with a lot of the local property owners, and we got lucky on some of them. And we were able to preserve a lot of the Buck Road area. And, that was solely volunteer by the property owners themselves. What I learned was, if people aren't willing to put their property in open space, there isn't a whole lot you can do about it. They have a right to use their property. So we enacted open space program, and what happened simultaneously with that was the bypass was finished, and 322 opened up, and people saw an opportunity to develop their properties. So it became harder and harder to secure these properties. So I'm going to go through the history of the zoning here in East Brandywine. We had a standard zoning in place. And when Applecross began its process of wanting to develop 621 acres in this township, we changed the zoning to try to prevent them from doing it and to reduce the number of houses they could do. Well, they sued us. And they prevailed, as you all know. So a few years later, we decide we're going to do the village development plan. And Bruce was involved with that. And in order to enhance the Guthriesville Village, to try to get a community centered there. And the zoning, now, I'll go back to Applecross. They had Phase 5 was designed for 20 single-family units. 20. When they changed the zoning, Applecross didn't ask them to change it. It was changed because we were trying to create something here in the village, and I think it just went beyond where it really should have been, in my view. We winded up with about 200 houses we really didn't need. Applecross winded up doing 95 over here. We've got 295 behind the township. We've got McCausland and Plank with 89 units. We got 154 units over here at Mapleview. Most of them we did not need to have. But that was the zoning that was adopted because we were trying to accomplish something that failed. And we did not get any development in the village that we wanted. All we got were townhouses. Now we're not talking about changing that. We're talking about changing the R1 and the R2. The zoning still allows 7 townhouse units per acre in this township. And my concern with this ordinance is that it doesn't really take a look at all of it. So if you're going to change 15% of the cluster and reduce it by 15%, shouldn't you increase the required open space by 15%? That wasn't considered in this. There were some things that weren't considered. So in 2010, they changed the zoning from allowing 1.5 acre building lots in R2 to go to 2-acre building lots. In R1, from 2 acres to 3 acres. Now we're getting repercussions on that because people who've had properties that had planned to do things with them, now they can't. And we're seeing more and more zoning hearings about these different things. My concern is hurting the few remaining long-term residents of this community that happen to own property. I'm not interested in penalizing people because they happen to own property. Some of these people are generational. They've had these properties for 4 and 5 generations. It's their estate value, it's their retirement value. We're essentially saying we're going to take 15% of that from you. But we're only going to do it to you and not the rest of the residents in this community. Everyone in this room, if I were to say to you, I'm going to take 15% of your retirement plan right now, would you raise your hand and agree to that? I don't think so. So my concern is this does not really dig into the issue that we have. It's not going to accomplish much. And I just feel that it's very unfair at this time, after the horse is out of the barn. This township, made mistakes. And those mistakes are what we're seeing now. And I understand a comprehensive plan. And I understand that we don't want more houses. I don't want more houses. But we cannot continue to try and deny people their rights to use their property in the way that they should, the way that their neighbor did. It's just fundamentally unfair. And that's why I'm against this, and I'm hoping to reel Kyle in on this. But I just wanted to put it out there for everyone to understand really what's been going on here. We don't want the cars, we don't want the houses, but are we really going to penalize these few remaining property owners over this? Where it really is not going to have that great an impact? And that's my concern with this. If we want to go back and look at this ordinance and see where we can actually take the bonus out completely and maybe do something with the 1.5 acre and the 2-acre people that have gotten caught in the middle of all this and make those conditional use and really study this in detail. This was hastily prepared and hastily presented in an effort to try to appease some different concerns. We got to do something. Well, let's take our time when we do things because we've gotten in trouble in the past every time we've tried to change these ordinances. We always winded up not really accomplishing what we set out to do. So that's where I stand on this. I'm not in favor of this, and my vote would be not to approve this.
Tom, you can go ahead now. Thank you.
I want to
I
comment.
know, but Tom,
Yes.
go ahead. You can leave.
Well,
You're good.
oh,
Thank
well,
I thought he was-
okay, I can stay a while, but it's up to you.
Oh,
I
thought you
appreciate
said, I
it.
thought you said 7.
No, I gotta leave about 7:20.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So you
Right,
just
I-
hang up at your leisure. Don't cut into us. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I thank Francis for his presentation. I understand where he's coming from, but I may not agree with it. I think it's important. The first thing is it wasn't hastily put together. I've been working on this for 1.5 years, studying our zoning. For those of you who have attended any of the ordinance task force meetings, I think I missed one in 2 years. So I also studied the survey in great detail that the residents prepared in November of 2021, which had such an overwhelmingly large percentage of response, the people that prepared the survey were shocked. And yes, it is changing something that affects people that own property in R1 and R2. It does not affect R3, which you can have townhouses in. But there's very little R3 property left, I believe. And the real purpose of this is not to penalize the landowners. It's to take away somewhat the advantage of cluster. This only affects cluster building. It doesn't affect the development of a normal subdivision. First of all, it's only for parcels 10 acres and larger. It is also, again, cluster zoning. Right now, you get a bonus if you will cluster your home. So on 10 acres, if you cluster, if you do a traditional layout, I think you get about, I got the numbers here, just give me a second. On 10 acres, you get 3 homes on R1, 4 homes in R2. You get 1 more each if you cluster. The real thing is 20 acres. And at 20 acres current, you get 6 homes. You get 8 if you cluster. In R1, in R2, you'd get 8, and you get 11. It's to cut those cluster advantage in half, so that, to me, you're not necessarily penalizing the landowner of 10 acres or more, and I'll get to that in a minute. What you're doing is trying to encourage more traditional development. If they want to cluster, and almost all builders want to cluster because the infrastructure costs are significantly less. You have a smaller cul-de-sac if you have a cul-de-sac. We had a development just recently that was approved along Osborne Road. That's a cluster even though there's 7 homes in a row on Osborne Road. That would have been much better if they would have put a cul-de-sac in and had the 7 homes off of that, but they were allowed to cluster. This would have affected that property by 1 house only. So anyway, by reducing, and Francis is correct, it's about a 15% reduction. We tried to cut it in half, the bonus. So it went from a 30% bonus approximately down to 15. We're trying to encourage developers to think how they really want to develop that space. We still want them to do a cluster, but they're going to do a cluster even if you did away with all bonuses, in my opinion, and I talked to a large number of developers who sell to realtors. So by reducing that 1 house, you're going to increase open space. You're going to help preserve some of your view sheds, and you're going to help with the trail development because there's more land available. The other thing you're going to be able to do is there's better and more area to control stormwater, which is the big thing. The stormwater control, you have 1 less house, 1 less impervious surface, and you have more land available to manage the stormwater. You also have more area for sanitary sewer waste and water and disposal, because you can use the open space for your drip irrigation. You may even, depending on the property, be able to put I know you have because I've done it, you can put your standard septics even in open space. So it was, to me, and why I started studying it was and I've lived here 55 years, not all my life. My wife has lived here all of her life, but I've only lived here 55 years. Are you 55? So I've lived here still longer.
I'm going to say my age.
Pardon me?
It's not polite to ask my age.
Okay.
Luke, can you put that open space map back up,
I'm
please?
old.
So that's why it was presented to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission reviewed it the first time, and it was also was not a unanimous vote, but it was it was voted by the Planning Commission to go to the supervisors, and the supervisors voted for a 247 review in the county. The county liked the idea, and I hope that, I want to comment on the economics. Because even at 20 parcels, you're only losing 2 homes, and at 10 parcel, you're actually only losing 1 home. I believe that if people want to live in East Brandywine Township, and now there's slightly less properties that'll be developed through supply and demand, going back to Adam Smith in the Wealth of Nations 350 years ago, who basically outlined and invented capitalism, the prices will rise, and the people over the long run will not lose any money. So, although I can understand the argument Francis made as wealth, I say it's theoretical, where supply and demand is always actual. So I am in support of this, and I hope we can move it forward. Again, you're not touching R3, and again, there's very little R3. Is that correct, Luke?
If the question is there any remaining undeveloped R3 parcels, I would say yes, there is very little.
Right. Okay.
But maybe 1/5 of the township is zoned R3. Would you like a zoning map to?
Yes.
So what you see on the screen, the yellow is R3, the white is R2, and the pink is R1 in East Brandywine.
So, is there any developable land that left at all in R3?
Well, I guess that there'd be 2 distinct records to check. We do the first one, and it's our 2023 official map. And there is on the official map, parcels that are noted as priority for use of open space funds are marked as the green cross-hatching that you see on the parcels.
Right.
There is, let me say, a strong correlation between development potential and priority acquisition in open space. So circling back to your question, is there any R3, is there much R3 development potential? I would say none of the parcels on the official map that are targeted for open space acquisition are in the R3 district.
I think that's why I concentrated on the R1 and R2. R3, if there is any, presents its own problems. It's entirely different. And all right, I will, so that's that is my reasoning for why I made the proposal. That is what I've been working on. I think the ordinance task force, I presented it to them in last summer. I did delay pushing it through because I knew Francis had a different point of view, and I didn't think it would be fair to push something through until he had a chance to be on the board. So,
And I appreciate that, Carl.
right, I mean, it would have been
Thank you.
It would have been unfair because everybody's opinion is important. So with that,
Well, so now I'm going to comment.
okay.
So my comment is simple. I can plead with both of you and say you both made a great case, but I can also tell you, Luke just pulled up the open space map here. That's the open space is a darker green and the,
So what we're looking at now, and please bear with me, I'm gonna switch it so that I haven't been doing any of this video capture for remote people who are watching the video at home. Okay, so projected is the open space map. All of the parcels that are not the pale green have some form of protection. So the color coding is aligned with the type of protection. So, for example, what we're talking about here is clusters, the development of one or more parcels of more than 10 acres into a development that includes developable space and open space. The open space that we've accumulated, or lands that are protected from future development as part of cluster developments, are shown as the purple. So the purple area are all open space, HOA open space, which is protected from further development. So that accounts for some portion of what you see as protected open space. Also shown on the map are lands that are owned by the township for active recreation. They show up as the dark green. You can see that the Bondsville Mill Park and the Spatola Park and the Community Park show up as dark green. Those are lands owned by the township. Other lands not used for active recreation that are owned in fee by the township are shown. They're in blue. The light green color you see is lands that have protection through the open space referendum program. There was the development rights were purchased by the township. So everything that's color coded on there is protected from further development.
all right, so everybody has a chance to see that. My comment that I was gonna make is I can side with both parties on this. Both supervisors have made very compelling statements. I'm also a big fan of not having the wool pulled out from underneath of you. And I feel as though by not giving a homeowner a ability to sell their land before such a drastic change is made, my only way that I would even consider this if it was an effective date of a year from today. So, meaning if a farmer had his land and he said, I have somebody who's gonna buy it in 6 months, he has that option to do it, and we're not gonna be holding it up in the middle of the process. So, I think that's the only way I'm gonna be convinced to do it immediately, would be to do it for a 1-year effective date from today. And so basically, that's where I stand. So you would have a motion to do it?
Well, let me comment on that.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that. And remember, this is simply to advertise it, because if it affects somebody, they have the right yet to come in.
Right.
And present to us how it affects them and whether they're for or against it.
And
So this is only just another step. It's not
And this would give me an opportunity to work on some of these open space properties that I have been, targeting with regards to the Open Space Committee. So I've been working with the chairman of that committee, and we've come up with a plan.
He has me working on a couple too.
Yeah, we came up with a nice plan that's going to allow us a little more flexibility in our ability for acquisition. So we're not as hamstringed as we were before, and we're going to be consulting with some local municipalities, our neighbors that have had some real success with acquiring some properties, East Bradford and West Bradford, namely. So I can go along with that.
Okay. So I have no problem making the motion to, I'll let you do it.
Tom, please correct me if I go off track here. I make a motion that we advertise a draft ordinance for adoption amending the maximum units allowed in R1 and R2 districts developed 1 year from March 1st of 2024.
Well, let me say this. As somebody said earlier, all you're doing right now is authorizing it to be advertised.
Right.
And we can put in that advertisement when we send the ordinance we have to send it to the law library. We have to actually draft the ordinance. So when we do that, we'll put in an effective date of March 1, spot.
Right, okay.
So we can do that.
And again, this is just getting advertised at this point, so
Correct.
we'll
It's
do
just
that
a-
with the effective date of March 1st.
I'd hate to not take the next step.
Understood.
I think that's a fair proposal. I can go along with that.
All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you, guys. All right, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to go now. Thank you for accommodating me.
Thank you. All right, so
You're welcome. Bye.
we are so out of whack here, but what we're going to do is we're going to get back up to new business. And,
Oh, you gotta,
oh,
I thought that you were going to have public comments on this tonight. Did I miss it by not speaking up at the beginning of the meeting on public comments on agenda items?
for what we just had?
Yes.
Yeah, that was in the front for the agenda items. But again, nothing's getting approved, it's just getting advertised, as Tom said. This is not done. It's just going to get advertised, that's it.
Do you want that?
You're welcome to make a comment, though, absolutely.
right, just for everybody, you have to make all your comments on agenda items before the meeting, to be fair.
I didn't know, I knew that, but I didn't think that I
Totally
thought-
fine, it's totally fine.
Okay.
We're so out of
We're
whack.
all
like-
over the place tonight. It's fine.
I knew that this was on the agenda, and I wanted to say a few words about it because I happen to have been on the planning commission back in the early days of when the idea of cluster development was on the agenda. And my position back then was not to support it. I did not support it because then, as now, you don't have to do anything to encourage developers to develop. They just do it. They keep pushing on it and pushing on it. For anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Sandy Moser. I have lived in the township for 50 years. This issue does not affect me in any way, shape, or form. I have 30-some years on the planning commission. And again, this was an agenda item, and it was dealing with houses. It wasn't talking about, nobody even knew about townhouses unless they lived in Philadelphia. And my position on it was primarily to keep as much open space open as possible. And when you use the term open space nowadays, it's like people are going to stand there and look around and say, oh, look at that tree, and we can see the hill over there. Open space to me is water recharge. I have 20 years on the municipal authority, or something like that. I just got an award for it. I should remember this, shouldn't I? And in the municipal authority, it's very important in this township that we have water recharge. Over 2/3 of the residents in this township are on well water. And that water comes from the sky. It comes down as rainwater, and it has to be able to go into the ground or it runs off. And it doesn't benefit any of our well owners. And it's really a very important thing. And all this development is going on, all the paving is going on, all the flooding that happens nowadays. Open space needs to be looked at in a little bit different way than I got the feeling it is now. I love the fact that we're saving land, but in calling for cluster, you're leaving land open right there where these people that are moving in, if they don't have access to public water and public sewer, they need that water right there. Applecross has this new development that's been being proposed on the K Farm. I don't know how many houses are in there. I've heard rumors about it. But look at all the land that's going to be covered with townhouses and with roads and so forth and so on. And within 300 yards, maybe, or 600 yards, there is a deep well that Philadelphia Suburban Water Company put in. No, it's called Aqua now, isn't it? I mean, it's a very deep well. The municipal authority does monitor that well and make sure that it's at a certain level. But that water it's very important, again, to have recharge there to keep that water in that well where it's supposed to be. And talking about wastewater, the people that are buying these houses and townhouses are going to have somewhere for the wastewater to perk. Now, I know that developers go out and they do their perk holes and so forth and so on, but when something doesn't work, then they come back to this township, they come back to they come back to the zoning hearing board, and they want something else. They want a little bit more here or a little bit more there. So I would need to know I would just like you to think about this in a little bit different perspective than the feeling that I got from here. And so whenever it's on the agenda for a vote, then I'll come back and add my 2 cents again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna move back up to, we'll hit new business, and we'll go to agenda B. Luke?
Yeah, thank you. Included in your packet is a application for a volunteer interested in serving on the Parks and Recreation Committee. His name is Tim Gold. I'm pleased to report that Parks and Recreation is recommending that the Board of Supervisors appoint Mr. Gold to the Parks Board.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint Timothy Gould to the Park and Recreation Committee.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, Luke, you might as well just keep going.
Okay, well, this is the part of the meeting where I do the happy face and then the frowny face, back and forth. So that was happy face, introducing a new volunteer. Here is the sad face. The next 2 agenda items have to do with the resignation of individuals serving on our zoning hearing board. The first is Tony Damiano, who has been on the zoning hearing board, serving in multiple capacities, including as chairman of that body since 1999. On behalf of I'm sure on behalf of the board and all the staff here, I'd like to extend my thanks for a lengthy term of service. But at this time, I would respectfully ask the board to accept the resignation of Mr. Damiano.
Reluctantly and sadly, I will.
I'll make a motion to accept the resignation of Tony Diamantano from the Zoning Hearing Board.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead, Luke.
Agenda item D is very similar. A relatively new addition to the zoning hearing board, Nicole Hatton, who joined in 2021, is moving out of the community and will be stepping down from the zoning hearing board. At this time, I'd respectfully ask the board to accept her resignation.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the resignation of Nicole Hatton from the zoning hearing board.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now we are going to go on to 7. I know it's not on, it's going to be postponed, but we said we would talk about 7G, and that's the financial security release of Applecross Phase 5B. We did receive an extension on that, but as I said, if anybody is here and wants to talk about it, they have the opportunity to do so. If not, it's going to be in, I believe, the next morning meeting?
Yeah, the next meeting of the Board of Supervisors is at 9 a.m. on the first Thursday
Okay.
of March.
So it will be discussed then, if anybody wants to discuss it then as
Aren't they
well.
going, and they're going to have the same problem that, because Panoni has to certify it.
Well,
I think it's the same disclaimer.
Yeah.
correct. Okay, I'll start at the beginning. First of all, the distinction between this agenda item, which is an escrow release, and the other 2 agenda items were an escrow release, is that there was a risk of a deemed approval in the first 2, and therefore the motion was to deny with reconsideration at a later date. In this instance, because the developer has granted an extension for the board's consideration, it is only necessary to table to a later date.
Right.
What the 3 issues have, I'm sorry, I'm going to, what the 3 agenda items have in common is that they were all associated with a recommendation for a release on a standard letter from Panoni. Upon review of that letter, the solicitor has determined that it doesn't make the representations that the MPC requires and is asking Panoni to revise the letter. I think that it's fair to say, if at the next agenda all 3 items are there, and Panoni responds, the recommendation will still be to release on all 3 issues.
Nonetheless, if anybody has any comments on Applecross release, I'm happy to hear it now.
May I ask a question,
Absolutely.
just in regards to some of this?
Can you come up to the microphone now?
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. When when you as a board are looking to the township engineer you're asking them to say that the items for which a release is being requested for have been constructed in accordance with the plan. Is that correct?
I think,
Well, if I may, we're looking for a recommendation from the engineer as required by the municipality's planning code. Not having that passage in front of me, I don't know what that language says. I presume it says something to the effect of that the improvements have been completed in accordance with the developer's agreement and with the approved plan. That would be, if you asked me what a recommendation to release the funds should represent, what a letter releasing the funds represents, it should represent that an engineer has, is certifying that the improvements shown on the approved plan and referenced in the developer's agreement have been completed.
Doesn't the
And-
final
and-
release,
and it-
excuse me,
go ahead.
doesn't the final release also have to have as-built? Any development I've ever done, you have to submit to get your final release an as-built, and we had earlier in my career here where we released all the funds and never had an as-built.
Okay. I doubt that the MPC references an as-built. It's entirely possible that individual developer agreements and/or municipal ordinances do require an as-built.
Yes.
I don't know.
All right, well, the reason I bring it up is that would, to me, they need to submit an as-built, and that would be something that the HOA and our engineer have to check.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because I'm aware that there are things, elements that were not built to plan, but escrows were released.
I mean, years ago, I had a small development, and the as-built showed that the spillway was 3 inches too high. I'd built a whole new spillway.
and
To
I
get
think
my
that's a
final
better,
release.
better suited question for Nate.
Nate and
yeah.
right.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
I realize.
I mean, this is just sort of refocusing, and some of it's current, so that's why I'm asking.
And
you know,
obviously
what
this-
you're looking for.
The next, I would say reluctantly, week to 2 weeks, hopefully, we can get answers to questions that obviously were asked by the HOA as well, so.
Okay.
Let me ask real quick, Luke, does the HOA have access to the documents with regards to the approval from Chester County Conservation District and Nate's letter, or not?
Okay. There's a,
To my knowledge, I think I can answer this. To my knowledge, based off a conversation with a representative from Pulte, they don't have to even inform the HOA of anything. Now, the township was trying to have an open dialogue with the HOA because we knew that there was issues. But to my knowledge, through the builder, they don't have to acknowledge, they have to have their,
I've been told the same thing repetitively, but then that's from the builder. So that, you know,
right.
I've been told things that were.
Regardless of what the MPC says, regardless of what the MPDS permit requires, and regardless of what our local code says, I think that East Brandywine Township recognizes that the public improvements shown on many land development plans, some may be offered to the township for dedication, as in the case of the road network in Hideaway Farms. But most of what are shown up in contemporary developments as public improvements, the eventual owner of those improvements will be the local HOA. And so this board and past boards have made efforts to loop HOAs into these discussions. But I'm not aware of any legal requirement that that be done.
right.
And yeah, with that, I was just suggesting that they possibly have the opportunity to review the documents from the Chester County Conservation District and the letter from Nate, from Pannoni, with regards to their position on these things. and
Well,
that'll help them.
Well, I would agree with you, because
I mean,
you
if you,
know,
I don't know what the
more, the
practice
more
is.
data,
Yeah,
to
I
me,
don't know.
it's always the more data, the better decisions that will be
I
made.
don't know what the
But
practices have been in the past, but I would think if they're going to take ownership of this and have responsibility for it, they should have that information.
the stormwater system is one thing. I actually was speaking of like stormwater inlets, which were a road construction piece, which ultimately does feed into the stormwater basins, but those were not done to plan.
So that would be construed on the as-built plan versus the original plan that was submitted. I'm drawing a blank on the original plan.
Right.
The original plan
Right.
is
Now,
not the
whether-
same.
As approved versus as built.
Built. So what you're saying is
But the
there could be an
county-
as-built that you have approved in the interim.
Right, and the county gets the
Instead of the
as-built.
plan. Yeah, that as an HOA, we would have no knowledge of.
Right.
Right, okay.
So,
Okay, that makes sense.
Thanks
for the information.
Yeah, I guess I would, for the benefit of those present and any watching the video, if you would mind a quick digression on where certain materials are, so that if someone who's interested could see.
Agenda, you mean?
Where if you wanted to see a recommendation about an escrow release,
Yeah.
or any other agenda item, I'm going to project on the screen for those at home, the program feed here. This is the section of our website called the Agenda Center. If you click through on an agenda, in this instance, I'm going to click through on tonight's, the packet materials are shown below the agenda on the screen. The escrow release in question, we're on agenda item 7G. The typical form of these recommendations is a cover letter from the township engineer. This is the letter for which the solicitor has taken issue with the wording and that Pannoni is considering rewriting. Just below that are a series of spreadsheets. Those spreadsheets on the far left column describe the particular improvements. It gets into the nitty-gritty. So here we have an erosion and sedimentation control, an ENS. So one of the things that must have been built is a construction entrance. The tricky thing about ENS is that they're temporary, so that construction entrance was there and it's not there anymore. But this just gives you an idea of an itemized list of the improvements that the developer was to build. On the right are dollar amounts of escrow that were placed for that, and also a history of releases of those escrows as the project proceeds to completion. That is available on the website. So.
Thank you.
The NDPS permits, they were, are not there, though.
Okay, so that is, I won't make you stand up again, so I'll repeat the question for the audio recording. The question is, are the MPDS inspections or notice of termination available on our website? The answer is no. For large projects, stormwater management is a shared responsibility between the conservation district and the township. When an inspection occurs or when a notice of termination is issued, notice of termination being the final letter that the conservation district issues saying this project is complete, those are issued on the forms. The conservation district is the original source of that record. So if you were interested in that record, you would either need to contact them or make a right to know request to the conservation district. We are carbon copied on those. We file them, but I would never represent that we have the comprehensive list of those records, because that's a different agency.
Okay.
May I ask just one question on this? What is, when you use a term for reforestation, what is that term used to represent? So there's reforestation separate and apart from land, shrubs and trees.
Are you talking about a line item
Line
on an
item.
escrow release?
Yes. So what does reforestation refer to specifically?
the best person to answer the question is the engineer. I'm going to take a swing at it. Approved plans do have generally a page called landscaping. And there would be a section in any given escrow release where there is an itemized list of the plants and the quantity that the developer was to have installed. Since we have the final release for this phase open, I'm going to scroll down and see if there's any section on landscaping.
Is this the Applecross one?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is.
There is, there's landscaping.
Right.
But
So I don't know if the word reforestation appears on here. It does.
that's why I was asking.
Okay, it says reforestation, and then in parentheses, it says shade and understory trees. So again, the best person to answer the question is the engineer is not present to do it. What I would suggest this means is, in the approved land development plan, there is a landscaping page. That landscaping page has a list of plants. And in all likelihood, off the language here, one section says shrubs and trees, and another section says shade and understory trees. So I would submit that if the release for reforestation is recommended, it means all the shade and understory trees have been installed.
Okay.
I also went through the final release twice now, even though quickly. There is no provision for as-built, and I believe there's no provision for as-built because the township doesn't require them because we don't own the roads, we don't own the basins, we don't own the stormwater system. The HOA does.
So the engineer has the
There's
ability
original-
to make a change in what's built without requiring an as-built?
It would be up to the HOA to try to obtain as-bills. I saw Bruce shaking his head. Does that make sense? That's why, so we have no way to require them because it's not our responsibility or property.
Well, they're still filled out, it's just,
Well, yeah, there's still the original design,
Right.
there's still the construction stakeout, the et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's all the surveying in there. And the engineer is inspecting that the stuff is done according to the plans, but there is,
Well,
he hasn't certified yet, that's the problem. He has to certify that they're done to the plans, but the plans don't always end up being actual.
but he's certifying something that he hasn't seen the plan for then, is what you're saying?
You know, the differences are so minor, you wouldn't notice them unless you measure them. I gave you the example of a 3-inch spillway.
Well, I recognize that, but for us, it was a $500,000
Right, I
expense
mean,
that we
so-
had fixing what was built differently.
They had
than
so
the
little
plan.
to look at, they found the 3 inches.
and I think it's a better suited question for Nate. I'm sure.
Yeah, we're not engineers.
Yeah, okay.
That is also a part legal question.
Right.
I do not know if the township code requires the submission of as-bills. I do not know if the municipality's planning code requires it, and I do not know if the developer agreement in this instance requires it. I think we can say, because we're looking at the document right now, there is nothing on this punch list for release that says the word as-built.
Correct. Actually, there's something at the bottom of the list that doesn't even exist. So I don't know whether the township is returning money based on an agreement that it wasn't going to be built, or down at the bottom, there's a walking trail and pedestrian bridge. Doesn't exist. But there's nothing in the letter that indicates that it was an exception or wasn't built. We can talk-
That is a very good question. I will weigh in on at least, I think, and again, just for the benefit of everybody, I know you're familiar with this. When we're talking about an escrow release, we're not talking about a cash escrow. We're talking about a bond or a letter of credit from a financial institution. that.
I understand.
Right, so the idea of security for public improvements is that if a developer walked away or went broke at some phase of constructing a land development, the township would be able to complete the improvements in their absence.
But in this case, if it wasn't built at all, that's okay.
Okay, I'm going to keep talking at the risk of
well,
being
I
way
don't know.
outside of my area of expertise.
We should talk about this offline.
If there is money if there is money withheld for an improvement that isn't shown on the plan, I think that's an error in step one, which is coming up with the itemized list of improvements. I don't think that it means that that money should not be released. Do you follow my logic? So the mistake, so at the point that a spreadsheet is made of all the public improvements with a dollar value assigned with it, if we had an item on there for $500,000 that was a helipad, and there's no helipad on the plan, I think in their very first request for an escrow release, they'd say, hey, go ahead and release the money for the helipad because it's not built and we're never going to build it. So all that to say is if there is a reference to something that isn't in there, I would submit that that money should be released.
Understood, but then that begs the question, you don't require that it be done then? Even though the plan submitted said that they would build it. In other words, if they didn't build sidewalks and they said, well, we're not going to build them, would that be okay? Does that make sense?
I think
Or-
without asking Nate, it's
Yeah.
impossible, because it might have been brought up to Nate and we just don't know.
Yeah,
and
it
that's-
wasn't in the letter.
And-
That's
and-
why I was like,
and
what's
there-
going on here?
There is also a thing that is a change order at the field. And so at a point when someone is, so if site-specific issues arise during construction and the amount of a certain product is amended,
Okay.
we don't go back to square one and amend the document for the public improvements. We
Yeah,
just-
that's fine.
Yeah.
But the document doesn't refer to that. That's why I'm saying, yeah, okay, that there was a change order and therefore this is included. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else on that? All right, the next item is H. We're going to talk about inclement weather policy. We here at the township have a pecking order when it comes to snow. We have people in different areas, so it's kind of getting difficult. We have someone who could be a half an hour away for their residents that works in the township. We have somebody who's 5 minutes away. My recommendation is we follow the county on what the county does for their closures for inclement weather, such as snowstorms and hurricanes and such, to make life easier for staff. And obviously, that could be changed by the department heads if needed for a certain situation. With that said, if we were to follow the county, which is the suggestion I'm making, I would think that we would have to have the option for staff to be able to work from home. So I guess my question to Luke is that something that we can do? The schools are doing it now with the students, where if a snowstorm hits now, they unfortunately don't get the snow days anymore, they do the schoolwork online.
Right. Okay, so the easy part of your proposal is, when do we advertise, either with signs on our door or signs at the LED or notices on our website that says the township is closed today? If we implement a policy that says that we're going to follow the county's cues for when county offices are closed, that could not be more simple. We will check their site, and if they're closed, we will mark our facilities as closed. As it relates to staff assignments and compensation, I would say all township staff is in one of three categories: essential, non-essential, and able to work remotely, and non-essential and not able to work remotely. So as I would say within the org chart of people who answer directly to me, so I'm going to speak just for the administration team, I feel every individual on the non-uniformed side of the building could work remotely. We have the technology, and we will soon have the phone system that would make that possible. I don't know that that's true for every
Sure.
non-essential employee in the township.
And now I'm going to offer the same question to you, chief.
Yeah, the two secretaries that we have at the police department are not set up to work remotely.
So is that something that you think we could get one of them set up to work from home as a backup plan? I know you also,
I don't know, yeah, I'm not sure that's gonna be feasible for our side. You know, one of the suggestions or requests I was gonna make, and you just kind of touched on it, is giving some flexibility
To the department heads.
heads, that if, let's say, we close, if, for example, Luke's personnel have the ability to work from home, but I need to bring a secretary in to help with the calls coming into the building, that we just adjust it with PTO or something. Because we're a little bit different on our side. So for example, the storm we had the other day, they closed the offices, but we had so many emergency calls coming in with trees down, roads closed, and I was trying to handle all the staff, you know, on the street, and yet you had UPS drivers showing up at the front door. We had people, a couple residents show up at the front door, so that the business doesn't stop during a storm. So for me, on my side, I would definitely need to have a secretary come in. And if I could adjust with giving that one employee some PTO time to cover what everybody else is either off or working. The other option too, as I had mentioned to you, is if you can call it whatever you want to do, but if you did it like as a flex day or something, say, okay, we're closing the offices because of the storm. Want to work from home? You work from home if you get the ability. If you want to come into the office, we make arrangements to get you in somehow. And if you don't, you use a PTO. Couple different options there. We're gonna need a little more flexibility on our side.
okay, you guys have?
I have concerns on working from home. I would be most likely not in favor of all employees being able to work at home. And I'll give the example of our treasurer. Now you have an unsecured computer out of our control in someone's house that can be hacked. It's not going to be under our protection that we have here. And that person has the right to transfer monies between accounts as well as write checks. It's not a good idea to be doing that kind of work from home at all.
Well, and I think that would go to the flexibility of the department head to say, hey, we need someone answering the phones, we need somebody setting up meetings, we need this, but we don't need the treasurer's, you know.
Right, but you
Checks
run into
getting
problems.
cashed
I mean,
for one
she
day.
can't even process checks because all the bills are here.
Right, right. So again, that would be at the discretion of the department head. How to handle if a treasurer something was needed for the treasurer. Francis?
Hasn't she been working remotely due to her maternity leave? How's that been going?
Right. Well, okay.
I'll let Luke answer that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also, before you do, we have bonds on this as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So the answer let's dive into the technology that makes remote work possible. We will shortly, hopefully for the end of the month, have a new voice over internet protocol based phone system. And employees are able to check their voicemail and make calls that appear as though they're at the office from their home using that new technology. We also have the ability to remote into your computer using a secure VPN that would allow you to use your desktop as though you were sitting at your desktop through any computer with internet access. There is no data on the local device, let's say the private computer, the computer owned by the employee that's accessing the information that is stored there. They're just using a VPN to connect to and use their computer remotely. There is now, and there always has been, you know, anybody who has access to our online banking system can access it from any computer with internet access. That's the
After
nature
the
of online
township, it's
banking.
entirely different. I was on the school board, we lost $1 million in 13 minutes.
There is a very short list.
Password changing every 30 seconds.
That's correct. Only bonded employees have access to online banking. But online banking can be accessed from any device with internet access.
Correct.
Right. So that has always been a risk, regardless of
I know, but
the policy.
you're increasing the risk dramatically by letting somebody work from their own desktop or laptop at home, dealing with the banks.
Okay. All right. I guess without, I'm not familiar with every non-essential employee's daily work environment. I cannot speak for those that work on the police department. They do have access to extremely sensitive information that can only be accessed from the building, and they are not able to work remotely. I will speak for those non-essential employees, and I would include myself in that, in as much as my reporting is necessary for a winter weather event. I tend to do so, but it isn't necessary. I'm able to assign sufficient work that I don't feel like it's necessary to have a policy that they use a paid time off day to not report in that day. I feel like I trust my team to work effectively from home.
Right, they'll get the work done.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, first of all, you got to get the IT stuff completed that you're already in process of working on before we look at remotely working at home and who can do what. I think that's a two-step process. You got to get the stuff up and working, and then working with our IT consultants, make sure we're protected if we're going to let them work from home, transferring monies.
I want to clarify, I'm talking just for the storm.
I understand that.
Okay.
Right.
I didn't want to.
See, here's the problem. The treasurer's a unique position, because could she process checks at home?
Sure.
Yes. Only if she thought the night before and packed them all up in big boxes and took them home with her. So
Right.
that storm ended up dumping twice the snow that it was predicted to dump. So you never know. That's the problem. And I don't want people carrying invoices in and out of the building on a.
And I don't think any of our invoices are that, critical that they couldn't wait a day or two
No.
for any storm.
They
So, I think that would fall under the department head decision.
But she can work at home if there's any special projects that involve Excel or Word or things like that. That's the appropriate stuff.
Let me.
Way off base because we don't even have the internet fixed yet.
Let me say, I appreciate Chairman Scribner's effort to come up with an objective criteria for what our decision process is for closing the building. I think that's a justifiable standard. We follow the county standard. In the absence of such a policy about staff inclement weather, one, it hadn't snowed in 2 years, and two, I was not closing the township. I considered a decision in the absence of a policy my discretion, and I don't remember an instance where I ever sent people home early during a snow event. Anybody who's up here disagrees with me, please correct me, but I don't recall I've ever done that. I also didn't expect an employee who lived further away or had some concerns about their safety, I wouldn't penalize them for not showing.
Go ahead, Chief.
Right, so this rolls back to the comment I had earlier. And I fully support you wanting to close the offices for situations like we had the other day, because I do think The fact that I had an officer get injured and fall, I had a police vehicle get stuck, we had cars sliding off the roadways. I would really hate for our employees to have similar situations and get hurt and whatnot. So I fully support that if you know, we needed to close the office, to close it. And I think, you know, how often does this really happen? I think as long as we had the flexibility to just get somebody into work if we feel we're gonna need somebody to come in, and then with the board support, just reimburse them for some additional time off, PTO, we call it now. I think that would work. I think that, you know, unless we run into another major problem with it, that I don't think we really need to think about this too hard out of the box. I don't, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I think we've taken a turn that doesn't need to be taken yet, so I'll make a motion that I'll make a motion that the township offices will be closed for non-essential people on the same basis as the county closing its offices. for
And
non-essential
allowing
people.
the department heads to make determination. And as I've stated to staff also, I wanted to reiterate one other thing. If they're able to come in later, like that storm the other day, it ended at noon, it was sunny and 42 degrees and melted by 1 o'clock.
Right. Yeah.
Staff could come in, if they could come in, they're welcome to come in.
Right, we want it flexible, we don't want to make it.
Right,
We
right.
don't want to make it rigid.
Right.
I agree.
And I think, Luke, I think the way you handled everything the other day with getting it up on the sign, getting it on the website, you know, I printed a sign out and put it on our door. You know, it worked. I mean, we were fine. I know you had a couple meetings that I'm going to assume you were able to get them canceled, but
All right, well, I'll
I mean,
second,
we just do
sorry.
what we need to do.
I'll second Carl's proposal. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna move on now to, ordinances and resolution for consideration. We'll go to item number A. Luke, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so unlike most of our volunteer committees and commissions, our code calls for appointments to the zoning hearing board to be done by resolution. Usually, we just do it by motion, as we did earlier with an appointment to Parks and Recreation. In this instance, we have a draft resolution in your packet. It's Resolution Number 2 of 2024, appointing Becky Corbin to the zoning hearing board. I would at this time, Ms. Corbin currently serves as an alternate to that body. At this time, I'd respectfully ask the board to adopt Resolution 2 of 2024.
I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2 of 2024, appointing Becky Corbett to the zoning hearing board.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
With that being said, whoever's watching out there, we have several vacancies on that zoning hearing board and other departments. So don't hesitate to come in and volunteer.
Okay, so we're gonna go on to C now. Luke, continue, please.
All right. C pertains to a draft ordinance change to the township's zoning code. That's Chapter 399. And it would amend, I'll draw your attention to the packet attachment. It has the agenda item numbered as though it were on the Planning Commission's agenda. But it is a change to Chapter 399, Section 108, Schedule of Required Parking, and in particular, subsection B4 for restaurant, tavern, or similar use. The existing code reads as follows. The schedule of required parking for a restaurant, tavern, or similar use is 1 space per 2 seats, or 1 space per 100 square feet of total floor area, whichever is greater. On the basis of experience, we have heard a proposal from a township resident to use an existing property as a restaurant. That property is 1,500 square feet, and the parcel in question has 12 parking spaces. So under the interpretation of the current code, that property could never be used as a restaurant, no matter what the particulars of that restaurant use were, because 1,500 divided by 100 is 15. So at a minimum, that parcel would require 15. The proposal before you this evening is to amend that section of code, changing one word, namely total, to two words, namely dining room. So the proposed language would be the required space is one space for 2 seats or one space per 100 square feet of dining room area, whichever is greater. A proposal was presented to the Planning Commission last week. The advice to the individual applicant was to pursue a variance from the strict interpretation of our code in the case, in the particular anecdote that started this. The Planning Commission did not recommend that the board proceed to amending its zoning code as I described. But a member of the Board of Supervisors had asked that it be on the agenda tonight for your consideration. So for your consideration this evening is a as yet undrafted ordinance change that would change total to the word dining room. And the action item, should you elect to do so, would be to direct staff to refer that change to the county for Act 247 review.
And who had
You
some,
want to speak, or you want me? What?
Go ahead. I'll speak as well.
Okay. The word restaurant I look as a bit of a misnomer, but I guess it covers everything. It is a coffee shop taking over the Hopewell Pharmacy building. And they are short 2 spaces, is it?
3.
3, okay, the 15. So to me, it's a little different than a restaurant. You don't have a huge kitchen staff. You have maybe 1 person or 2. Some people will sit there. The most seats you can get in there is 24. And finally, to me, that building is so limited in its uses, and it's so nicely done, and they spent so much money making it fit in with what they hope Guthriesville to become. To leave it vacant, to me, is not the right way to go. You need to get the ball rolling if you want Guthriesville to become something more than a crossroads. So I'm in favor of this resolution, and I guess I would go with seats. That's the way I've seen a lot of other townships, especially when they set the sewer ordinances or the EDU calculations. They generally base it on seats. So.
I agree with Carl. We have an opportunity for a nice little coffee shop to open up in our village. And this is what we've been working towards for years and years. And as I said earlier, when I was reviewing the history of our zoning, you know, we've had failure trying to get businesses and opening and operating and services, you know, in this village area. And that's what we ultimately would like to see. So the worst thing you can have is an empty building business in your community. It really reflects badly on, you know, the impression people get. Why is that always closed? Why can't anyone make it there? You know, so whatever we need to do to get this coffee shop, get this business opened and operating, you know, it's a little step, and then someone else will see it, and maybe we'll get somebody else to come in and start doing some things, and hopefully it'll go from there. So I'm 100% in favor of this, and as quickly as we can get this approved, the better.
I'm going to add also, I'm not worried about the 12 spaces versus 15, because obviously if people can't park, they'll move on. And it's not like an hour and a half dinner or an hour and 15-minute dinner. I would imagine, with my experience with coffee shops, I was practicing CPA, is that, believe it or not, the bulk of their business is mid-afternoon and mid-morning, where people come and meet. It's not necessarily during the rush hour. There's no drive-in, so you're not gonna have stacked cars. So I think that there's a concern that people will figure a way around it.
One of you guys want to make a motion?
Go ahead, Francis.
You had made a comment about going with the two seats, but the way it reads is restaurants, taverns, or similar use, one space per two seats or one space per 100 square feet, total dining room floor area, whichever is greater. So we're going to adopt that entire
Okay.
language. We're not going to, it'll give them the option, you know, and I think that that's really what we want to do here.
Right, I didn't mean to exclude one or the other.
Yeah. So I make a motion that we adopt the proposed amendment to,
I'm part of the interruption. Earlier this evening, we had an ordinance that had completed its 247 review, and the action item
Yeah.
was to advertise for adoption.
To advertise.
So there are 3 actions the board takes on every ordinance.
Just two-
Permission, or every zoning ordinance, I should say. Referral for 247, permission to advertise, and then finally adopt. This is at the first step, so the action item would be a referral for Act 247 review.
I make a motion that we make a referral for the Act 247 review of the proposed ordinance amendment 399-108.
Second?
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Luke, you can keep on going right into the next one.
All right. Over the past several meetings of the Board of Supervisors, we've heard feedback from individuals with concerns about their experience in complying with the township's stormwater regulations for small projects. So we're not talking about disturbances over an acre. These are disturbances, either total area of land disturbance, 5,000 square feet or more, but not more than an acre, or new impervious, more than 1,000 square feet since 2024. The township, in responding to these concerns, has the most common refrain is the county's, the township's stormwater ordinance, what we call our chapter 345, is in almost its entirety the model ordinance that all municipalities are required to adopt. So every time there is a model ordinance change to the Chester County model ordinance, all the municipalities must adopt them. That is mostly true. The ordinance is every municipality has the same ordinance. But that model ordinance does describe a few areas where municipalities can exercise judgment. One of those areas that a municipality can exercise judgment is in the determination that whether a deck with no impervious surface below it, say no patio below it, or whether a pool should count for the purposes of requiring stormwater management. The county's model ordinance allows municipalities to include or exclude decks and pools from the definition of impervious. What's before you this evening is a copy of the township's definition of impervious surface and the specific editor's notes to the model ordinance that allows municipalities to make changes. So similar to the previous agenda item, this was considered by the Planning Commission, and there was no recommendation that the Planning Commission continue to propose a revised definition, nor a recommendation that the the Board of Supervisors proceed with referring this for Act 247.
Anybody?
Go again, Carl?
Sure, I'll make a motion to refer draft ordinance, or a number?
Well,
No. This is
actually,
240.
there's not even the language of an
To
ordinance.
refer draft ordinance for Act 247 review concerning decks and pools as impervious surface. That cover it all?
Right. So with the last ordinance, I read aloud the section of code as it existed now, and then I read aloud the section of code that would be the proposed change. In this instance, in your packet is just the definition of impervious surface. If the board is interested in referring it for Act 247 review, I think the action item would be directing the township solicitor and staff to amend the existing ordinance to exempt decks and pools from the definition of impervious surface.
I make a motion
And then
that
refer
township
that for
and
247
staff
review.
With the solicitor, draft a revised ordinance allowing decks and pools to become, well, pervious surfaces then.
Pervious. It would be
And
pervious, not
forward for a 247 review. I got a yes, I got a nod.
I have
Got a
no
yes
notes on your
nod.
motion.
Okay. So second time.
I'll second it.
Okay, that's what we're waiting for.
I just wanted clarification with Luke here. There's a word that I'm looking at, and it says decks and pools as
Right,
impervious
that's what
surfaces.
struck me too.
Should it say decks and pools as pervious surfaces?
And the thought process here is pools hold water when the rain hits it. Decks allow the water to go through the deck boards into the ground below the deck.
Correct. The current definition counts pools as 50% impervious as a compromise from a previous board, and counts decks as impervious. So the language of the agenda reads, permission to refer draft ordinance for Act 247 review, decks and pools as impervious surface. The motion is, yes, that they would be pervious
Right.
entirely.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to get back to where we started, and we're going to go to the treasurer's reports and authorization to pay bills.
Before you jump there, and we were talking about, can I add something to the section?
Sure. And nothing's final. This is just,
You never know. Carl, you brought up tonight, not impervious, as-bills.
Yes.
And I think I would like to see it added as for discussion in our meetings, is what is an as-built and what does the township require?
I think weren't you referring to the fact that when it's an HOA, the township doesn't
No,
have?
but even on a single lot, do we do as-bills? Is there as-built required?
No, it's only when you're dedicating something to the township.
We'll have to
like a
talk
road
to
or
Nate about that.
a retention basin. They make you go in and do an as-built for
Oh.
everything, but you end up, and that's usually done when you're setting the concrete monuments and the lot pins.
But I've been, over the years, a lot of different townships require the homeowner doing small jobs, come in and plot the pool on the property, because they do, a pool builder will come in and change the location, and you won't even know where it is, or the stormwater basin.
Well, that's our inspection. We need a better inspection. I'm not going to have a homeowner. I wouldn't think it'd be right to have a homeowner have to go do another survey then.
Okay, well, I know there's townships that do that.
The example I was bringing up was Hideaway Farms.
Yep.
Never had an as-built,
Right.
but but the roads are ours.
So let's add that for just a discussion at our ordinance task force meetings.
Well, and maybe,
If that's allowed.
maybe it is relevant, but
Okay.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you. Treasurer's reports. Oh, you don't have?
Okay, yeah, so, sorry, too many buttons to push.
No, you just need a motion to,
Right, so.
I'll make a motion to authorize the payment of bills and approve the payroll.
I'll second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Luke, I'll turn it over to you for your township manager's report.
I have no report.
Okay.
Much to everyone's relief, I'm sure.
We don't need to do the building inspector's report tonight. Matt, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay, so we'll go on to the police department, please. Chief?
Good evening. I'll make it quick. The report for January, we had 2,394 events recorded. We completed 201 investigations. We had 4 criminal arrests, 3 summary arrests, 3 warrant arrests, no juvenile petitions. We investigated 13 traffic accidents. Officers issued 110 traffic citations. They issued 46 traffic warnings, and officers logged 9,947 miles of patrol. Training completed for the month. Detective Shepard, Officer Ray, Officer Smith, and Officer Hayes all attended Penn State University's police supervisory and service training. Officer Smith and Officer Fox attended a breath test certification training, and as of January and February, the entire police department is going through its annual state mandated Act 180 training. We're all doing that online. We had 1 piece of correspondence that was from West Brandywine Township Police thanking us for our assistance to them on a burglary in progress. And you have copies of the monthly investigations and officer activity reports.
Was the officer who fell hurt?
Yes, minor. She's no loss work time.
That was really, that was the polite way of asking.
Yeah.
I guess that leaves the fire department.
And Minquist.
Yep.
I don't have any. No.
I know you won't jump, you won't miss the opportunity.
You may never come back again.
For January 2024, East Brandywine Fire Department responded to 94 total incidents. That is 53 calls more than last year for the same month. So the increase in volume is starting to set in. We had 24 fire calls in East Brandywine, 19 medical calls in East Brandywine, 9 fire calls in West Brandywine, 27 medical calls in West Brandywine, 1 fire call in Upper Euclid. We used 150 gallons of East Brandywine fuel. We didn't have any estimated fire loss. We had a total number of trainings of 5 with 28 people in attendance. Our average fire department response was 11 per call with 19 for major incidents. I don't know if you heard of the major fire in Ephrata today, but they called for our pumper tanker on
Martins.
west side of Ephrata to respond. On March 23rd, jointly with the East Brandywine Police Department, we're going to have a active shooter mass casualty exercise between the 2 departments. And also, just to add to the chief about training, we were happy to host the Penn State police training at the firehouse. For a whole week, they were in and out, and we got a lot of good compliments about that.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And does Minquist have any reports tonight?
Pleased, this is a new addition to the agenda. I'm pleased to add that there is now a report. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. Matt Wagner, Assistant EMS Chief.
Sorry, we had to rearrange this.
Normally,
Oh,
normally you're going to be in the beginning, and I
Oh, that's no
apologize to
worries.
take our first responders and have to sit through tonight's meeting, but we had a lot of weird.
You can send a nasty letter to the solicitor.
Yeah.
No worries. This will be a short report. For the month of January in East Brandywine Township, we had 32 calls, 12 were ALS, 20 were BLS. Transport outcomes was 7 to Paoli, 16 to Chester County, for 23 total transported. 11 were transported ALS, 12 were transported BLS, 1 no services required, 3 treated and refused transport, and then 5 recalled en route. Top call types were accident, ALS abdominal pain, BLS sick person, BLS fall, BLS abdominal pain. Dispatch to en route, average time is about 2 minutes. Total call time is up to 71.6 minutes with the overcrowding in the local hospitals and the lack of Brandywine Hospital.
I appreciate the report you sent to us. I read it. It's good to help us get grounded into what actually goes on.
Absolutely. And obviously, if you guys have any more information you're curious about, if you want us to add or change anything in the report, just let us know. We can throw it in there. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, unless I hear otherwise, did we miss anything in that?
Did we do the pledge?
I think we got everything. Any public comments on non-agenda items?
Thank you, you three. I appreciate the efforts and the camaraderie and dealing with everything professionally.
Well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I don't believe we have any notices tonight. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody, for putting up with a long night.